We're going to hear from Pastor Reece today about building a household estate. This is a man who has certainly put his money and his effort where his mouth is, well worth your attention. So everyone, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Pastor David Reece.
All right, so thank you for your attention. I want to make sure that if you walk away with nothing else today from me, that you walk away with this idea. The idea that I want you to walk away with is you are the master of an estate, whether you think you are or not. You have a duty to deal with your estate. You have an estate. And the question is, what are you doing to manage it? So with you having an estate and dealing with that reality, if you're a man and you're the head of a household, you're a master of an estate. And as a wife, you are the mistress of an estate. The two of you together have a duty to lead it, to care for it, to build it up, and to pass it on to your children and your children's children. And so the question for you is to think through how can you do that well, and how can you deal with the lives that have come in our generation. So building Christian households and estates is a passion of mine. The reason I care about it so much is because we have so much wickedness that we have to fight. What we need is more power amongst Christians. And so if Christians are going to have more power, what they need is they need tools, they need resources, they need to consolidate. And most of the work that has to be done is work that has to be done in terms of the household. And the household is where you accumulate wealth, and it is where day-to-day leadership occurs. And so let's consider for a second, what has God given to us that we might understand how we are to lead in the state? The book of Proverbs is a manual given by God. It's a divinely inspired manual for dominion and for management. There is an excellent commentary on the book of Proverbs that I would encourage you to look into. It is by Bruce Waltke. It's a 2-volume commentary. It's technical, it deals with language and all that stuff, but it has all this wonderful stuff in it where he talks about the details of breaking down Proverbs and also about its structure. Now, there's a shorter version that he's got as well that you can get that doesn't have all the technical stuff, but that Bruce Waltke, he has it. Now, basically, when you think about the book of Proverbs, it has 7 major sections, okay? The book of Proverbs starts out with the first 9 chapters, and it's focused on being written to the youth. Now, if you think about the book of Proverbs, you have this sort of idea of the Solomonic, short statements of wisdom. And those are very common in the second section. So chapter 10 through 22, verse 16, you got all these little statements. Now, there's structure inside of that, but it's harder to see than in the first section. In that first section, you got like obvious blocks of text that talk to you about how to live your life as a young man. Then you get into this idea of being a young man who has his own house. And then that chapter 22, verse 17 forward, you get for this little chunk, you got 30 sayings of the wise, and it's designed to look backward to summarize what you've just gone through. And there's this turning point when you move to the next section called Further Sayings of the Wise. It starts to look forward at the rest of the book, which starts to go into leadership and management positions. Now, there's a chunk in the middle, it's chapters 25 to 29, that is also the divinely inspired manual for middle management. And people hear middle management and you think, that sounds uninspiring. Well, it's divinely inspired, so deal with that. But also, there's this reality that this chunk, like so many people in leadership, are not the king. They report to the king. And when you're in a position of authority, but you're not the top guy, you have to deal with managing up and you got to deal with managing down. And so many people fail at that point. If you want to build an estate, what you've got to figure out how to do is how to create value for other people. And a lot of the time, that's going to look like serving somebody else well as their employee and figuring out how to get them to pay you a lot of money so you can start to build up capital on the side. And this section is the section to help you to know how to do that. I literally have my executives go through this and talk them through it. I have a sermon series on it. I try to encourage them to think about this idea of middle management. And there was all sorts of problems about like who you should hire, who you should fire, people to make sure you move out, looking for red flags and smoke and problems that you can identify problem employees early on. Now, chapter 30 is written for the heir to the throne. And whether it's a literal throne or whether you're waiting for an inheritance or whether you're waiting to take leadership over an organization, it's a great section that teaches you how to deal with that. And the last section, chapter 30, is the section on kings. And here's the thing. We all know Proverbs 31 as the section on the woman of valor or the woman of virtue. It's a chapter written for kings. And the first third of it is about stuff for kings directly, but the last 2/3 of it is pick your queen well. So think about how important that is. The major lesson for kings there is pick your queen well. Now, for you queens, you are to learn from that about how to rule well beside your husband. But these are key things. So now the rest of what I want to say to you, this right here is where you dig in. This is what God has given to you to understand how to lead an estate well. And we read Proverbs and we don't think about all the stuff it has to say about money and leadership and all that kind of stuff. But God cares about how we lead people, and he cares about how we steward assets. And we need to focus those things on the glory of God. Now, Proverbs 30, verses 7 through 9, in that section on the idea of being heir to the throne, it says this: 2 things I request of you. Deprive me not before I die. Remove falsehood and lies from me. Okay, so think about that. First of all, this idea of the importance of getting rid of falsehood and lies. When you are trying to rule well, one of the grave dangers is that you believe falsehood. One of the ways of seeing a throne established is to see liars removed from the court of that king. When truth is spoken, justice reigns. And so it is important that truth be spoken. And it is important that lies be removed. So there's this prayer as someone's preparing, as he's the heir, that lies be removed. Now, the next thing it says is, give me neither poverty nor riches. And you think that might be an odd thing to emphasize when trying to encourage you to build up an estate. Well, we have to define poverty and riches. Poverty is not having the resources that are necessary to do your duty. Riches is having resources that you don't know what to do with them. When you have money, when you have resources that you don't know what to do with it, the temptation is to luxuriate, to consume, to waste, to squander, to gamble, to throw it away, to give it to worthless people, to bribe fools to be around you. This idea of avoiding poverty and avoiding riches, both are dangers. Why? Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. Now, when we think about this idea of being full and denying God, here's the danger. Deuteronomy talks about this idea of you make money, you become proud. You think you have the power to make money. You think you're the one that built yourself up. And you think your money is your strong tower and fortress instead of God. That's the danger. So those are lies to be avoided. Now, with poverty, there's this tendency to think, I don't have the resources I need, and the temptation is to steal. And property rights are carefully guarded by the law of God. Forgive me 1 second. Be grateful for prayers to stop coughing. Now, when we think about the household is instituted by God, and it's instituted by God in Genesis 1 and 2. There are two institution texts. What's the problem? It needs to be closer to my mouth. All right. Forgive me. The devil is working against me with water and coughing and microphones. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. All right. So Genesis chapter 1 and 2 have the institution of the household given by God. And the institution of the household given by God is given to us in the first passage where we have this idea of man and woman being made. And then in Genesis 2, you have the explanation of the household in terms of its role, its functions, and you also have this idea of the one flesh union. And the one flesh union is this idea that under law, in a covenant, God brings a man and woman together. They are counted as one in terms of being one legal person in terms of that marriage. And as a result, their flesh, their physical bodies are each other's property. They're counted as one, and the nakedness and the use of the body together is a result of that law order. But the other things that happen there are not merely the idea of marriage and romance. We also have the idea of children issuing from that. We have property and the idea of exercising dominion and subduing the earth. And so this dominion work is the process of taking physical material and ordering it and using it to make it so that the earth is taken from wilderness, which is unformed, into garden city. So you cause the earth to be filled with knowers of God, and as they fill the earth and they form the earth to make it useful for man, the other thing that's happening is you have human beings who their minds, when they're born, are relatively empty, right? They're the image of God. They have certain innate concepts. They're inexcusable, but they also, in the process of education, there's a forming of the mind and a filling of the mind. The forming of habits and structures and systematic doctrine and the filling with all sorts of information, and that forming is the sorting of it. So that's the kind of catechetical process. And so this is the mission given to the household. Have children, rule over the physical world, have those children take over physical possession from you as they grow and mature, and to work with your wife to rule together as king and queen of the home. Now, to re-summarize that, there's a duty to work to expand and to improve both the physical world and the mental world. You have to deal with the external world around you, and you need to deal with the forming of the inward man. Now, that's dominion work. And then there's a duty to preserve. One of the things that's happened that's a tragedy in Western civilization is this. We have seen a Protestant civilization grow up, be built to rule, to be dramatically powerful, dramatically wealthy, and then we have seen people fail to preserve it, both in the church and in the state. And as a result, what has happened is the things that were built have been torn down, and we are going through the process of rebuilding again. That process of rebuilding can be avoided by carefully preserving, guarding, protecting, maintaining, passing on heritage across generations. And so when you build up wealth, it is your duty to prepare suitable heirs. And if the heirs that issue from your body are unfit, it is your duty to disinherit them and to give that wealth to men who are wise. That is a harsh truth. The reality that giving over resources to those who are fools is how you set up giants to walk the earth and to oppress Christians. We need to avoid that. Instead, we need to see Christian men powerful in the earth. And so this call to build estates, to build Christian estates, is a call to see Christian men of future generations made powerful by the work we do today. And it is also possible that your work can have fruit in this generation, not just for future generations, but that you can build and the Lord can bless now to see you wealthy and powerful. Is that guaranteed? Like literally every time I talk about this, somebody clips something out and is going to say that this is the prosperity gospel, right? They're going to do it to this speech, even though I'm saying what I'm saying right now. This is going to happen. I guarantee it. The idea is not that you have a mechanistic promise that anybody who believes the gospel is going to be wealthy and powerful. No. There's also not a mechanistic promise that by applying the law order of God that you're guaranteed to be wealthy and powerful. But the law of God is a manual for power and for wealth. When you do what God commands, it encourages the gathering of power and it encourages the gathering of wealth. The law of God teaches us how to rule the earth. And so the earth is designed to function so that when we apply his law word, it yields to us its treasures. And that is the way life works. Now, as we think about the household is one of 4 institutions given by God. There's the individual, household, church, and state. Okay? I don't have time to talk about all of them. The household's what we're focused on, and I want you to understand that the household has 3 elements. There's marriage, there's parenthood, and there is the estate. We are focused on the estate. But in order to run the estate well, you must be a good husband and a good wife. You must be good parents in order for the multi-generational vision to work. And you must manage the estate well in order to see it preserved, built up, expanded, and passed on. And so these things, we need to understand those elements there. Now, I'm going to reemphasize this, but Pastor Kahn mentions William Gouge. William Gouge's book on domestical duties is incredible. It's amazing. You should absolutely get it. At the end of this, you'll have my email address. Send me a request. I'll send you a digital file that's available in the public domain for Gouge. I'll get you the 2-volume version that doesn't have all the good stuff cut out. It's shocking. Some of the new publications of it literally have the most practical and useful elements cut out. So you want to get a version that has everything, not pieces that are cut out. Now, when we talk about a Christian home, we need to have two things that are carefully guarded. The gospel, acknowledging the reality of Christ as Savior, and the law. We need to recognize Christ as Lord. When we think about him as Savior and think about him as Lord, what we're dealing with is he is the one who sovereignly saves us, and he is the one who commands us. His law order is what tells us what to do. He has the right to tell us what to do, and his law is how we know what we ought to do. Now, every institution that God has given advances the goal. When we think about the household advances the goal of filling the earth with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea by having a place for discipleship, having a place where children are born lawfully and holy, to have them be raised up in the fear and admonition of God, to have property and to have servants that are hired with that property, and the use of that property governed by God's word so that that property is used so as to glorify God. We have the manifestation of the rule of God by having his law order used in that household over that property. Now, for you men who are masters of the estate, and you women who are the mistress of the estate, the man is the head of the wife. He is the leader. He can command his wife. He can give his wife orders. You are an officer as a wife. You're an officer in the house. You are the second in command. And both of you together must rule. And the wife must work well with the husband and seek to advance his rule. Now, when we do this, that means both of you need to exemplify what ought to be done. You need to exemplify it to other members of the household. You must give direction about work to be done. You must delegate, which means granting authority with clear goals. You must also divide labor and make it so that people specialize at certain tasks to reduce the amount that has to be thought about. The household needs to have a legitimate and holy seed. You have children born into the marriage or adopted. There's a goal to pass on wisdom and to train succession to take over the property. And family worship is one of the big things you need for that. The Directory of Family Worship, written by the Westminster Assembly, is excellent for thinking about how to encourage well-ordered worship in your household. And then you need to share and enjoy and pass on the wealth. So it's important that along the way, you're using the fruits of what God has given to you and enjoying it and praising him and causing your children to love the culture of your home. Because it won't go multiple generations if it's a place of misery, a place where the fruits are never enjoyed, a place where the beautiful things are never eaten, but only looked at. And so it's important that you use the things that God has given and enjoy them along the way. And so having to deal with the balance of all that, we'll walk through a little bit later. Now, as the master and mistress of the estate, again, there's a need to exemplify working diligently. And so if you want a copy of these slides, email me afterwards. I've got a bunch of verses that are meant to help you to think about each of these duties, and you can look into them later. I don't have time to go through all of them, but my desire was for you to see that the scriptures address these things. So Proverbs 27 is a poem on capitalism, which I love. And then you have Proverbs 31, which is about the woman of valor who's effectively managing as the number 2 in the estate. And then you have this idea of delegation, which involves this. Some people don't like to delegate. When you don't delegate, you are setting a cap on what you can accomplish. And a lot of people think, I can't delegate, I can't afford employees, I don't have people who work for me at work, I'm not a manager or whatever. No, the way you learn as a man to delegate is you must delegate tasks to your wife. And also, the man and wife must delegate tasks to the children. From a very young age, you can have your children learn to do chores. And those chores must be done diligently and well. And what they do is they free up the man and woman of the house from having to think about everything. Delegation reduces the amount of information you have to have in your mind. Delegation reduces the amount of thinking and information to process. And delegation also makes it so that you have less decisions to make. Men, if you have a high-earning job, you know that you have to make a lot of decisions. And if you come home and your wife asks you what you want for dinner, you suppress crying. There is this, I don't want to make any more decisions. right? It could be the easiest decision in the world. It could be something about what you want. It could be something that's meant to be kind. But when you reach a breaking point on decisions, you go, I don't care. Give me gravel and I will chew it, right? There's this desire to not have to make any more decisions. And thankfully, my wife has never given me gravel, and so we're doing very well. But this idea that there's a limit on the decisions that you can manage effectively, that there's only so much you can think about, there's only so much information you can collect, delegation reduces that. It's an entrusting with authority to make decisions to get stuff done. Now, there's this idea of discipling or training of servants. This should obviously happen. A husband should disciple his wife. Parents should disciple their children. But employers must disciple their servants, and you practice that in the leadership over your wife and in the leadership over your children. And this discipleship occurs in two ways. There is a discipleship in godliness and the general application of doctrine and law. And then there is a discipleship in the competent performance of tasks, the training to do tasks, to be productive, teaching people to redeem the time, to not sit around and waste the time. Now, the division of labor and specialization is unavoidable because we're finite beings. You're not as good at everything as I am. Pastor Kahn just talked about this idea of leadership being a gifting and being a thing where some people are doing that work and other people are doing other work. And we find that as an idea that is important. Is specialization. We don't want to specialize down to the point where we only have a very limited set of skills. You want to have a general competency, but you have to have some things that you spend more time doing than other people do, and it allows you to provide value for them more efficiently. And also that's going to occur with your wife, it's going to occur with your children. You're going to divide up labor, and they're going to be better at it in various ways than each other and than you. And so the division of labor is important to making it so that things can run efficiently because of the fact that it, by delegation, reduces what you have to think about, and by the specialization, increases efficiency so stuff gets done faster. Now, this idea of sharing wealth, again, there's a virtue called liberality. And this idea is that you're free in the holding on of possessions. The Bible consistently warns against slavish behavior, grasping behavior, hoarding behavior. And instead of hoarding, the idea is don't store everything in the barn, plant it back in the ground or sell it. You invest, you sell, you free things up, you move things along, you make a profit, you don't hoard. You don't put all the dollars under your mattress. You don't put all the corn in one barn. What you're doing is you're selling, you're deploying, you're putting back in the ground. And so the liberality manifests itself in being willing to take risks because you're holding on to property freely, but it also allows you to give rewards to people who do good work, including, by the way, Proverbs 31 talks about allowing a wife to eat of the fruit of her own labor, and that she, by generating profits, is able to buy land for her own household. This idea that you encourage good management, even though the property is all under your authority as a man, you're thinking about how to make it so that your wife and children can enjoy fruits of success as they accomplish things. And so those sharing in rewards, being hospitable to other people, having them over, hospitality is expensive. It takes time. It takes up your space. It consumes food. It makes it so that any comfort that you're sharing with those people, it costs you money and time. But you, by this virtue of liberality, of not being grasping, but holding freely to property, knowing that it's God's ultimately, and that you're trying to use it to bless other people and bring glory to the name of the triune God. When you do that, when you're hospitable, it increases the joy of your house and encourages hospitality when your children leave your home. They begin to understand what it looks like to be hospitable, that they might invite you over when they have grandchildren and you want to see them. That example is important for thinking about people outside of the home. And then there's this idea of charity or generosity, where there's the giving of things from the fruit of your labor. And when you do that, when you give to the poor that are believing, when you give to the worthy poor, you are giving or lending to God. And there are no better rates of return than the rates of return in God's private equity fund. He will give you magnificent rewards that are better than anybody else can promise. And so I strongly encourage you to that sort of generosity. Now, the husband and wife, the husband's duty is to wash the wife in the word. He has no power of the rod. He does have the power of the rod over the children. And historically, you have the idea of servants with some ability to give punishments. And this idea that in the marriage relationship, all there is the ability to rebuke And it's important you have good officers you can go to for counseling. So I encourage you to think about having a good church and the importance of, if you don't have one, you need to either move to one or start one if you're fit for doing that. Now, keeping covenant is key in the marriage for you to be functioning to build an estate together, because the disillusionment of a marriage is one of the great ways to destroy an estate. And so having the marriage work well, there must be fidelity and loyalty, where you're not cheating on each other, and you're also not giving your loyalty to somebody else, but your loyalty is to your spouse. There's a need for the man to love the wife in a self-sacrificing way. The wife must respect the husband. There's a duty to give respect. And respect is something that we don't talk very effectively about. William Gouge talks very effectively about it, and so does William Perkins. Those two Puritans do a great job of talking about it. And they talk about things like giving titles of honor. They talk about doing things like giving obedience, giving clear idea that you're going to give obedience, not talking back. If you think your children talk back, you might want to ask yourself, do you talk back to your husband? That's one of the things that encourages that. If you want to see a chain of command that's functioning well, you need to see a wife that is respecting the husband and showing what it looks like to function well together. Now, the leadership of the husband and the obedience of the wife need to be done in a way where there is, and I know Pastor Con used to talk about servant leadership. We all know the good way it's supposed to be used. Servant leadership or servant lordship is this idea of lordship that serves for the benefit of the ruled party. And husbands, it's your job to rule for the good of your wife, but you do rule. You do rule. And that means you can give commands. And so you as a prophet must teach the truth and correct error. You as a priest must maintain holiness in the relationship. You as a king must provide and protect. And so in the marriage, in leading children, in leading the estate, you are prophets, priests, and kings. And it is your duty to fulfill those roles in each of those elements of the household. Now, for the father and the mother, you work together. You have a holy seed. You're giving them a Christian education. You're giving them discipline, right? That means you have the rod. You are spanking your kids. Look, the Bible makes it very plain. The rod is for the back of a fool. By the way, it doesn't mean you have to hit them on the butt. You can hit them on the back, like the back. The human being back that you talk about is the back. The upper part of the abdomen on the backside. That's where you can do it. And it's a dignified way of giving pain quickly so that you don't have this long-term problem of, I've got to discountenance them because they're losing some reward for 2 weeks or a month or whatever. No, it's very quick. You give them due process and then you discipline them and you move on. And it creates good order and love in the house very fast, and it creates productivity. So the Bible is not a liar. The rod is used as a symbol to represent the ability to discipline, and discipline with the rod is very important for an effective working estate, because your wife and children are the starting point of the people working on the estate with you. Now, you're passing on wisdom to train for succession. Deuteronomy 6 talks about set times. You're training your kids to do secret worship by themselves, praying to God, reading his word, singing his praises, and then you're also doing it as a family. And then you're doing it as you walk by the way. You're teaching your kids, hey, look at that over there. Learn from that. Hey, this guy did a foolish thing. Learn from that. Hey, this is how you do this, and this is how we do it to the glory of God as you're walking around and dealing with life. There are 3 things to do to build up the team of the house, to make it so you can work effectively together. You must work. If you don't work, you'll never learn to work well. You start to work together and everybody's bad at it. And when you're bad at working, you go, you know what, this isn't very productive. But that's the training cost. That's the training cost. You have to train your kids to do stuff. If you don't work well with your wife as a team, you have to work together and figure out how to work well together. Otherwise, you're giving up the benefits for the rest of that marriage or the rest of the child's time in the home from having them work effectively with you to build the estate. And you're going to send them out when you send your kids out, and they're going to be lazy or they're going to be incompetent. You must train them so they understand how to be dominion men and women. And so when you're doing this, you work together. There's recreation, and recreation is play, and play is pretend work. It's stuff that's fun to do. You know, sports help to develop physical capabilities and competencies, and then there's things like strategy games where you help people to be decisive. You know, one of the great things about strategy games is forcing your kids to play when they're going to lose, because I love winning so much, that's all. No, the reason is because it's not fun to make your kids play when they're losing, but it's to make them deal with making the least bad decision. And so often in life, you're stuck in a situation where there's bad decisions on both sides. You have Scylla and Charybdis. What are you going to do? And what you're stuck with is you have to make the least bad decision. And strategy games are a practice when you're losing in making the least bad decision, doing it decisively and moving on. And when you're winning, strategy games can sometimes turn into you losing, and then your pride gets crushed. Or sometimes you learn lessons about this is an intelligent way to think about this stuff. So play is a key part of accelerating life. Play is like fast forward life, where you can teach lessons in story or in a game. And so you have this opportunity to create a fun home and also to do stuff where they push through. And you make your kids into good sports by having them learn how to lose and how to do it where they don't get pouty. And they're not happy about losing, but they know how to lose by fighting their best till the bitter end. And then at the end of it, they go, all right, what's for dinner? And so that, moving on, and your wife answers because you're exhausted and you don't want to make any more decisions. Now, when we think about children working on the estate, Galatians 4:1 talks about how a child is like a slave until the time appointed by the father. We find that offensive, so I'm going to leave it where it is. Now, wealth, when we talk about wealth, it says, we have this idea of sharing, enjoying, and passing on. Proverbs 13:22 says, you need to pass on an inheritance to your children and your children's children. The righteous man does that. So these are things that fathers and mothers need to be thinking about as duties. Now, when we think about capital accumulation, how does the law of God relate to that? Okay, first of all, commandments 1, 2, and 3 teach you the goal, glorifying God, first commandment. The second one is how do you worship God and how do you avoid worshiping false gods? Because here's what happens. If you worship money or some other false god, what's going to happen is you're going to become skittish, you're going to become weak, you're going to be terrified of losing your God. When you have the God of the Bible, you're not afraid of losing him because he will not abandon you. When you know God, you cannot lose it. He preserves. None can be taken out of his hand. You can't jump out. People can't steal you out. He's not going to throw you out. And so when you have God, when you have the knowledge of God, and you know you can't lose it, and it's the good, and you want to buy wisdom and not sell it, when you recognize that that's the good and no one can take it from you, it makes it so that you can be a Calvinist risk taker. You can say, I believe in a sovereign God who controls all things. I can risk it all on this. And if I win, I can use the resources to the glory of God. And if I lose, God will preserve me. He will uphold me. And I will pick myself up, trust in God, and lead my wife through the tears, and we will build again. And so this idea of being willing to take risks, this willingness to be able to do that. And wives, so often the man of the house recognizes there's a need to do something. He's miserable in a godless institution. He's working for pagans, and he's surrounded by people who are from globo homo centralized, and they want to force some sort of garbage that he has to listen to on a monthly basis or whatever. And he goes, I need to leave this. I need to go to a righteous land. I need to do something where I can see godliness reign. And the idea of starting his own business is terrifying. You're used to the steady paycheck. And so those golden handcuffs, the slavery of being stuck working for pagans, so often wives discourage husbands from taking the risk. Men, it's your job to lead your wife through that and to tell her, I must do this for my good, for your good, for the good of our family, and for the good of future generations. I must build something Christian, and I must take the risk. And if we fail, we'll eat ramen. It will make choosing what's for dinner very easy. Now, the third commandment talks about covenants and this idea of not taking God's name in vain, not swearing falsely. Understanding the duties that you've got helps you to order your time. One of the things I am plagued by personally is I'm looking for opportunities. I'm always looking for opportunities. I'm always wanting to talk to people. I want to evangelize. I want to look for business opportunities. I always want to look for stuff. And that can make it, the novelty of that can take me away from caring for the stuff that I have a duty to care for, right? It can make me distracted. And so covenant relationships make it so you know the order of loves that you must give. I have to give enough time to my family. I have to give enough time to my church. I have to give enough time to my country, right? This idea of the order of loves makes it so we know where to put our money and our efforts into, and it makes it so that we have enough time to do diligent work in industry to build up resources. Now, the Sabbath makes it so that you're a project manager. because you're not allowed to work one of the 7 days, and that makes it so that you have to figure out when you're able to work. When you have to manage time, you have to account for time. You start to schedule it, as opposed to just this endless drifting through a never-ending sea of I can work, I can relax, I can go to church, whatever you're allowed to do. Instead, God says, here's the rhythm of life. 1 day in 7, you will rest. You will worship me. You will give the word to your wife and children. You will cause them to come out of the public preaching of the word. You will worship me in public. You will gather with the saints, and that day's mine. Now, I own them all. That's what God says. He owns them all. But in owning them all, he also says, for 6 of those 7 days, it's fit for you to work and to build your own resources and to enjoy by recreation. Work and recreation, 6 days, and 1 day for the worship of God. That's the order of time he's given in a rhythm of life. And you know what? There's a promise in Isaiah that when you call the Sabbath a delight, it results in you being in positions of high power. There's a promise of power with it. It's interesting. Our country got rid of all the Sabbath laws, and our country's declining, and Christians are declining, and Christians are being dragged around and trod underfoot. I think the dishonoring of the Sabbath is a major part of our decline from power, because it's also a training tool. Not only is there supernatural blessing and cursing, but it's a training tool for helping you to think about time and to value the limited nature of time. Number your days, oh man. Now, when we think about the 5th commandment, it teaches us about functioning inside of an organization, honoring authority. The 6th commandment teaches us about anger and vengeance and bitterness. Beloved, I think many of you are bitter about ways that wickedness has ruined things for you, and you spend a lot of energy on that bitterness. Throw it off. Give it to God. He will avenge. Vengeance is his. He will avenge. He will destroy all of his enemies and all of our enemies. All of our enemies will either go to hell or they will be converted. If that is not sufficient for you, your bitterness is a wickedness that will destroy you. You must move on and do work. You must not chase vengeance, but instead do productive things. What you must do is leave the vengeance to God. He is an angry God. He's a vengeful God. Vengeance is his. He will destroy your enemies. Now, when we think about destroying enemies, when there's legitimate power to destroy and to punish the wicked, when you have that authority, you must do it. We must seek to have good leaders that will destroy the wicked. We absolutely must see that happen. We need civil magistrates. But we're not going to see it happen unless you build Christian wealth. If you don't have Christian wealth, and if you're not competent men who can rule, this is only to the men. Men, your duty is to take public office in the church and in the state. Your duty is to build up wealth, to have resources so you can do it. You need that. Wives, you must help your husbands to have resources so that they can rule. Why are we ruled by inferior men? We are ruled by inferior men because Christian men either do not have resources or they have resources and they do not care enough to resist the wicked with those resources. I'm doing what I can. I need more of you. I need help. There's a lot to do. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough power. I need your help. We need to increase wealth and power in the possession of Christians, and we have to work together to do it. Pleasure seeking can throw away your money. There's a proper lawful order for enjoyment of things in moderation, in their place, in their time. There's nothing so destructive for a man as to throw away his life being enslaved to pleasures that consume his wealth, consume his time, destroy his body, and make his mind a slave. The 8th commandment teaches us to budget. The tithe, God requires us to be accountants. He says, you're going to count your money, and then you're going to give 1/10 of it to me. He forces you to count your money. And he does that. And then there's promises that he will fill your barns up. This one, that right here, that's going to be taken for Prosperity Gospel clips. It's going to happen. God said it, though. So this is the general tendency, this idea that there's a need to tithe because God will bless it and he'll increase your wealth. Reputation must be guarded, but you have to be willing to lose reputation. When you accomplish stuff, people attack you, they'll tear you down your reputation. They will lie about you. And then we get the 10th commandment and contentedness. And you know where midlife crises come from that destroy everything you're building? From being discontent with the knowledge of God and what he's given to you. So these things teach us what we ought to do and how to rule our souls so that we can rule the exterior world. Now, capital accumulation is a process that first begins with you have to learn about stuff. You got to study carefully the law of God and the means of production. There's two things there. The law of God teaching you what you're supposed to do with stuff that you rule, and the means of production. In other words, capital, tools, skills, organizing labor, doing all that stuff. That's part of this idea that you have to think well in order to manage material. Management is actually something that requires effort, and it requires communication, and it requires courage and stability. The work that you have to do to increase income involves skill and serving a master well. So Proverbs 22:19 talks about the idea that if you work skillfully, you won't work in front of obscure men, you'll work in front of kings. Now, if you also want to work well and you want to build up resources, he who tends a fig tree eats of the fruit, and he who tends his master well also eats of the fruit of the service to the master. This idea that when you work for somebody else, you want to be an excellent servant to them, a loyal servant to them, and you want to do it skillfully, and it results in rewards coming to you. If you want to start getting capital together, you have to build an income that is significant. Now, frankly, the best way to get to a place where you can start putting capital aside at any time in history is to make about 2 times the average household income. So in the United States of America, depending on where you live, that's somewhere between 100 grand and 150 grand. So you think about, how can I get there? You know, high income earning men tend to have stay-at-home wives, and they tend to work hard. They tend to have limits on what they do. They make it so that their boss really values them, and they make sure to get stuff done as opposed to just spending time at the office. Spending time is not something that matters to a competent employer. What matters is getting the stuff done and doing it well. Getting stuff done and doing it well is a thing that results in productivity and profit for the employer and allows for resources to go to you. When people have to be fired, the people who get fired first are the people that the employer doesn't like and that they find to be ineffective. If you are a person who's loyal and likable and who works hard and generates value, you're secure in downtimes, and in uptimes, you are able to participate in the rewards. So you have to work to figure out how to increase your income. You want to start to change your hobbies to be productive. Hobbies like looking for stuff you can spend money on where the money doesn't go away, but instead it generates more money. Is there stuff you can buy? Like guns sometimes are cheap and other times they're expensive. When they're cheap, it's nice to buy them and then to resell them when they're a higher price. If you don't have the proper licensing, that might be illegal if you're caught. Now, if you think about other things, there are other things that you might be able to buy when they're cheap and sell when they're expensive. And if it's something you like and you're able to buy them and then you're able to sell them at a profit, you can buy things that are small and make money. And that gets you in the habit of making deals. When you're making small deals and making small dollars, you're training yourself. And those small dollars, when you're not making much, they feel like a lot of dollars. And as you learn to make more money and to do other deals, you start to put money aside. I would encourage you to put aside 10 to 30% of the money you've got that's coming in, which I know is a lot and very hard to make happen. But as you start to make, again, like double of what the average household makes by serving well, being competent, working hard, being skillful, when you do that, you start to have resources you can put aside. And wives often want to spend money, and sometimes, a lot of times, guys, you want to blow money on stupid stuff. Like, wives don't blow money on stupid stuff. Men don't blow money on stupid stuff. That's one of the keys to making money and having it turn into wealth, is you don't spend money on stupid stuff. You get in the habit of spending your money on things that will make you money. And I don't mean like buying something and pretending like you're going to make money on it someday in the future. I mean, you have a plan to turn it into money very fast. If it's not working after a few months and you're not doing anything with it, you're not making any money on it, you need to consider changing that plan, stopping and doing something else. Because you can lie to yourself about buying stuff that's actually not going to turn into making money. So the thing you're trying to figure out is how to take money you earn and store it into value and store it into future increased earnings. The other thing that has to happen for capital accumulation is you have to, as a husband and as a wife, you must command people under your authority to do productive activities. People don't naturally want to do productive activities. We want to waste time because we're sinful. But husbands, you need to do productive things and you need to command your wife to do productive stuff. And you need to command your children to do productive stuff. And what it does is it habituates them to being able to do work to build value for you. As things come up where you're able to start doing things like if you get a rental property, you want to train everybody to know how to do the little things like tightening up something that's easy to fix or fixing something like drywall, whatever else, the little things that you need to do to fix problems that are easy to learn from YouTube. If you don't know how to do it, okay, you can look it up on YouTube and you can teach your kids how to do it, which will make you remember it. And this idea of learning to do productive stuff that makes it so that you can start to have your family work together effectively. Now, budgeting, there are three main expenses. Everybody talks about all the details, don't get Starbucks and whatever else. Look, the three things that you spend your money on are your housing, your transportation, and your food. Okay, think about how to deal with that intelligently. Are you making smart choices about it? That's going to be most of your budget. And if you can figure out how to make wise decisions about those things, you can have a lot more money free. So that's the thing to focus on. Deacons in the room, when you're helping people who need monetary help from a church, like you go in, you're looking for those things, right? You're looking for their transportation, their housing, and their food. What are they spending on that stuff? Now, once you start to get capital together, your goal is to deploy capital. Everybody that's got to deal with the problem of lawsuits is going to generally say they want to broadly diversify this stuff, and what you're going to be able to get is maybe around 10% annualized return as the general rule. And they're going to tell you to put stuff in public markets and bonds and that sort of stuff. The Bible in Ecclesiastes 11, Solomon, who was very rich and very good at making money, talked about the idea of his fleet of grain ships and how 7 or 8 of them cast upon the waters to trade was a way of making it so that not any one of them could just be lost and have everything be ruined. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to be prospered and what's going to work out. So 7 or 8 investments is a type of diversification that's still pretty concentrated. 7 or 8 investments is a pretty concentrated investment set. But what it allows you to do is to make smart decisions. I think this is going to do well. And it makes it so that as opposed to thinking about tons and tons of possible things, you're thinking about, well, this is the best thing I know of right now. I'm going to put money into it, and I'm going to look for another one. And you get up to 7 or 8, and that's kind of the distribution you want to maintain. And so you got stuff spread out across a few things. And everybody's afraid of losing money. But I'll tell you what. People who are really rich take high risks, and they spread those risks out across multiple investments. And then they take other money that they preserve as safe money. Okay, the safe money is stuff for short-term liquidity. That safe money is stuff where you're going, look, here's something I'm going to place it in until I can find something better for it. And they take some portion of their money and they put it into very high risk opportunities that can make a lot of money. High risk means there's a 10% or something chance you can lose it all. You have to have the courage to be willing to lose stuff. And if you have several smart risks that are laid out where you can make significant returns, the probability of you building a lot of wealth is way higher than taking everything and spreading out across 8, 9, 10, 11% returns, depending on that year, and that sort of thing. So you're looking for ways to build wealth fast. We've been taught to save money for retirement, and I want you to put money aside and invest it so you can exercise power right now. I want you to build Christian stuff. I want you to own houses that you own, and then you can allow them to be rented out by church members at lower than market rent, or you can choose to give them to people that you prefer to give it to. You can have it be a part of building out your community. And so the idea of stuff you own, you control, as opposed to just giving it out to other people and letting them have your capital to rule. If you have stuff you own, you're able to exercise control. So typically when people talk about putting money into Reece Fund, the first thing I talk to them about is I go, do you have any real estate? Do you own any small businesses? Do you have anything where you got significant sources of income for yourself that you control? I want to encourage people to have stuff that they control. And that way they can build wealth, they can be secure, they can have something where they're controlling it, exercising Christian power over it. And then I'm happy to do stuff to help them build wealth, to work with them on that, but I want them to have something that they control. So I encourage you to think about taking risks over long periods of time and looking for long-term gains and building power. Not long-term as in you're waiting until your retirement to touch it. Long-term as in you're putting money away. You're not going to enjoy it for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. You're trying to build. You're putting the money back in to build. And you're doing it so you can exercise control over it now in your prime, while you have strength, while you're discipling people. Now, you need to learn the basics of finance if you want to build an estate. That means you need to know how to read a balance sheet. You need to know how to read an income statement. You need to know how to read a cash flow statement. I'm not going to talk to you about it. Look it up on YouTube. You can do it in 15 minutes, like 5 minutes per. You get the basics of it. And that lets you evaluate stocks, and it lets you evaluate businesses, and it lets you understand what you're doing for your own business. Like your estate. You have to consider your estate. The balance sheet is your own net worth. The income statement is the profits you're generating. The cash flow is what's coming in so you can pay the bills. Right? You're dealing with it. Understand the language of business, which involves reading financials. Now, the stuff to throw money into, real estate, small businesses, high yield bonds, stock indexes. Everybody's like, stock index, this is the thing where I'm putting stuff for my high risk things. Like, I don't have very many bonds. I'm focused on stocks. It's like, stocks, like that's like a savings account. Like, you just like the money I want to spend tomorrow, like let's put it in an index. Just have it sit there. It's so easy to be able to borrow against that stuff without having to sell it when it goes down. It's so easy to be able to put money into an index or into stock market stuff so that you can then have it making money and you can spend off of it. You have your paycheck immediately go into buying something like that. Like, who knows? It's going to go up, it's going to go down. Look, I'm telling you to be a high risk guy where the ups and downs of the stock market don't make your stomach like churn. You just go, yeah, whatever, it'll be up tomorrow. Yeah, whatever, it'll be down tomorrow. Like, that idea that you just roll with it. You don't care. You just go, over the long run, this is going to make me more money if I just throw my money into stuff that makes money as opposed to having it sit in a checking account where it's being inflated away. So you just do stuff. You just take risks. You just throw your money into action and you habituate yourself into it. You don't sit there going, I don't know, what's the best choice? Make a choice. And if you go, I don't want to make the wrong choice, okay, well, you got 8 chances if you're spreading out over 8 investments. If you do 8 of them, like, man, that's rough. But, try again. That's what you got to do. Your alternative is to sit around and let Globo Homo rule you. How's that going? So, the other thing is, in our circles, a lot of people hate borrowing money, and a lot of people hate the idea of lending money and collecting interest. They think it's usury. I don't have time to defend this in detail right now. I have places where I've done it before. Happy to send it if you reach out to me. On a basic level, the Bible says this. Usury is when you have a brother who needs something for his immediate consumption. Let's say I'm starving. I know, hard to imagine, but pretend I were. Now, my family's hungry, I'm hungry, I come to your door and I say, could I please have some food? And you say, sure thing, but you got to pay me back tomorrow and you're going to give me 10% extra food in repayment. That would be usury because you're charging interest on a charity loan to a brother for my immediate consumption. That's usury. The Bible differentiates the idea of business loans from charity loans. It is sin to charge interest on charity loans. That's usury. Receiving interest on business loans, where you're saying, I'm going to give you money and take a risk, and I expect you to pay me a reward for that risk. And if I lose the money, I lose the money, that's the risk. But there is a mechanism for me to get a profit. And the lower my risk, generally the lower return I will take. The higher the risk, the higher return I expect. That's the way this works. And remember, the Lord Jesus Christ said to the stewards who had the minas and the talents, he said, a guy who didn't do anything with it. He buried it in the ground, put it in the ground. He had it invested in gold, but didn't do anything with it that was going to produce extra value. It was just a store of value. He was rebuked. He was rebuked. And the Lord in this parable says this, you should have at least put it with the bankers so I could have collected interest. That's the scripture. If you don't like it, the problem you have is with Jesus Christ and not with me. I'm the messenger. But plainly, people think that's not what the Bible teaches, but Jesus said it, and he said it twice. He did it for emphasis, 2 different parables. So he has this intention for us to put money into investments and to make money, including the collecting of interest. There's a difference between charity loans and business loans. Now, when you think about capital and sourcing, the big thing that's difficult is where do I get the money to invest? On a business level, when I'm talking to people who are going to lead businesses, there are 5 sources and 5 uses of money. Here are the 5 sources. You can operate a business and make a profit. If you're earning an income, you're earning a wage, your operating profits are your salary. Okay, so you got money coming in. You can borrow money with debt. You can also sell off pieces of the company, you can dilute it. If you do that with yourself, you're selling yourself into slavery. I would suggest avoiding that. And then there's the sale of assets. You can sell off businesses that are a part of the business, or like equipment or things like that. And then there's this idea of capital calls, requiring the investors to put money in. On the other side, you can use the money for these things. You can improve the operations. And if you're developing a skill, training is a type of operational investment. If you're buying a piece of equipment to do work, that's a type of operational investment. You can repay debt. You can think about buying stock back of your company. You can look at buying other companies, and you can look at paying out dividends. Those are the uses of the money. And so when you think about sources and uses of money, these are tools that are helpful for thinking about it. And you go, well, I don't know if I can do any of these. Look, you have to meditate on this stuff. You watch one video on how to read a balance sheet, or you watch one video about how to get capital and use capital. That's not enough. You have to think about it diligently over time. You must study it. You must think about it. You make a hobby out of it. Listen to podcasts about it. Read books about it. There's all sorts of stuff to get and consume, and there's opportunities to practice. If you want to build wealth, you have to do work or kill somebody who you're the heir of. But don't do that. Now, the other thing is, when you think about return on capital versus the cost and risk of capital, when you think about paying debt off, a lot of people go, oh, I'm not going to pay this debt off right now. I'm going to invest it in something else. Now, if you're going to not pay debt off, a rule I use to evaluate whether to pay off debt or not is the opportunity to put money into an investment better be at least twice as profitable in my expectation as the debt, the cost of that debt. Because if you've got debt, paying it off is a certainty of the return of the interest you would have paid. If you have 10% interest rate on something, when you pay off that debt, you get a 10% return because you're not paying that interest anymore. It's certain. It's guaranteed. You don't have to, nobody has to pay you. You just don't have to pay them anymore. So it's a certainty. Now, if you're going to invest in something else, you need to have some sort of profitability that you think is going to be way better. And not just the maximum possible, but what you actually expect to get. Because the reality is, once you start taking risk, you become a little bit over-optimistic. Risk takers are optimistic, which is why they can take risks. And that's why it's important to have hope and to be able to look to the future and think that you might be able to accomplish something and to be willing to take the risk for the possible gain. So this idea of you need 2 to 1 in terms of the cost of capital versus your expected ability to get money out. So if your judgment's wrong, you're able to still maybe repay it or cover it or make it so that the loss of not paying off that debt is something you can deal with. Now, I have 5 lies here that are keeping you poor. Here are the 5 lies. If you think all debt is sin, you're not going to be able to do things like buy real estate. You're not going to be able to buy businesses. You're not going to be able to do that kind of stuff. Debt that is secured to an asset that produces money is productive debt. And if you're able to limit the liability to the object you're buying, you have a defined liability as opposed to a person being able to go after you. One of the glories of real estate is you can borrow $19 for every dollar that you put in if you're moving into it. And the money is the longest repayment schedule available. And the interest rates are the lowest interest rates on debt available. And so the inflationary system works in your favor for that. Some places real estate's too expensive right now, you can't get good deals, but learning about real estate so you can look for opportunities is one of the easiest ways to borrow cheap money and to spread it out over time and to look for opportunities to buy. Now, the other thing is if you think that interest taking is evil, then you're not going to be able to put your money into something where you're getting paid interest. You're not going to be able to put it into investments. A lot of times the people that think that getting paid interest is sin also think dividends and investing in general is sin. And so I would suggest to you that is not what the Bible says. The idea of interest taking being sin from Thomas Aquinas or Aristotle has no place in the biblical ethic for productivity. The Bible is a private property order that encourages investment and the fruit of risk to go to the owner of the property. Now, another lie is environmentalism. Here's why. You don't try to be productive and you don't try to do stuff to save time. You think your conscience is bothered and you spend time doing stupid stuff like trying to save the fish from straws or trying to save the turtles from straws, or there's a lot of straws that we have to deal with. I don't know. But I don't like paper straws. And so I would spend more money at your restaurant if you gave me plastic straws. If you could give me like 3 extras so I could burn them or throw them in the trash, I would honestly pay more. And so I think that it's important to recognize the earth exists for man. Man does not exist for the earth. And even in Christian circles, there's some sort of earth worship to be worried about. Perfectionism, the thought that, I'm going to do it right. If I don't do it right, I don't want to do it at all. Which is like, well, you're not going to do anything because you're pretty bad. So next one. Laziness and bitterness. When you try something and you didn't do very well at it, you start to become lazy and bitter about the failures in the past, and you think, I'm not going to try again. Great, you're going to sit there, you're going to be angry, you're going to be lazy, and you're going to think you're really smart because you're not spending your energy doing stuff that you might fail at. Look at me, I'm so clever, I'm avoiding work, and I'm not getting anything done. I'm so smart, not like these stupid people who are doing all the work. That's the lie. Like, I used to believe that. That was the lie I used to believe. If you believe that lie, if you think you're clever because you're avoiding work, no, you're making yourself lazy, you're destroying yourself. And if you've tried and failed and you're bitter about it, I've got 5 minutes to feel bad for you, and then let's go do something else. That's what you need. You need to move on and try something else. There's more to do. You can go fail at the next thing. The other thing is conspiracy theories. If you think you can't advance in life because somebody's keeping you down, then yeah, they're doing that. They're living rent-free in your mind, and they're keeping you down because you think they are. So get over it. Prove them wrong. Rule over them. Beat them. Throw them off. Get rid of the oppressor. Overrule them. Destroy them. Cause God to destroy them. Look to God to laugh in their face. If you try to do your duty and build wealth and accomplish things, and people are trying to oppress you or keep you down or preventing you from being able to rule, God loves to laugh at and destroy the enemies of his people when they mock his people or when they mock him. You know the story about Hezekiah and Sennacherib? Sennacherib had 120,000 crack infantry right outside of Jerusalem, and they're mocking God. And then Hezekiah goes before the altar and says, Lord, they mock you, and there they are, destroy them. And God kills them all, and Sennacherib wakes up, all of his troops are dead. He goes back home, and his sons kill him. Family problems. Conspiracy theories eat themselves. Sennacherib was killed by his sons. That's the way it is. Like, the church can barely handle hanging out with each other, right? Like we don't really like each other that much, right? So what do you think unbelievers do with each other? They eat their own. They hate each other. Like, we love each other. We're perfect at it. And we have the Holy Spirit, but they're not as good at it. Now, the reality that conspiracy theories are not what controls everything is important for you to get. So let me close out here. Proverbs 27, verses 23 to 27 is this poem on capitalism by God. Be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds, for riches are not forever, nor does a crown endure to all generations. When the hay is removed and the tender grass shows itself and the herbs of the mountains are gathered in, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of a field. You shall have enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household and the nourishment of your maidservants. You all have maidservants and goats, so you totally get this. Now, what's being said here is this. You need to, even when you're in power, remember this is the middle management section of Proverbs, even when you're in power, you need to not ignore managing your private property. Your flocks, your capital goods need to be managed even while you're in public office. You do that, and when you attend to your herds, to your capital property, what happens is you preserve your wealth. Riches are not forever, and a crown, authority doesn't last forever. It requires work to preserve both. And so, when the hay is removed and the tender grass shows itself and the herbs of the mountain are gathered in, the lambs will provide your clothing. What this means is you manage your flocks intelligently, and if you have a piece of land where you're growing hay, when the hay is removed, think about its use as a place for grazing. When the animals graze on it, they're going to poop there. When they poop there, the hay next year is going to be better. And the result is going to be that the herbs of the mountains get gathered in. The guys that were harvesting the hay, when the hay's been gathered in and the animals are eating in your field, then you're going to go out and collect stuff in terms of the herbs that are available in the mountains. You're rotating your resources around based upon opportunities. You have to intelligently manage, which means stuff changes over time. This opportunity, then that opportunity. This opportunity, then that opportunity. The switching places of the herds and the people working. Those are the types of things that management has to do. This makes it so that the capital goods you manage provide for your clothing, which you need on a daily basis, and they provide the price of a field. They give you capital for more capital. They make it so you have enough goat's milk for your food, your daily needs, kind of like your daily bread, And they give you food for your household to make sure that your household's provided for, and the nourishment of your maidservants. And that's basically like saying, and every business owner here will appreciate this, that's like saying you can make payroll. And if you've ever had a business, you've definitely never stressed about hitting payroll. That process of making sure you can pay your people, when business is not going well, hitting payroll is like, yes, I have paid everybody, they are all eating, and nobody is quitting because I didn't pay them. And that thing right there, that end note, like the person who wrote this, Solomon, clearly understood the idea of hitting payroll. You can pay your maidservants and give them their piece. I appreciate your time. I'd ask you to check out our website, puritan.church, check out Reece Fund, and please get William Perkins and William Googe. My wife did a great job of creating a short version of the Perkins one. Reach out, we'll send it to you for free. The Googe one, we'll send you a digital version of it. And I pray that the Lord blesses you with this and that you're able to build up your estate, run your household well, conquer the world. Let's make this a Christian nation. Lord bless you.